Hi, everyone. My name is Damith Karunaratne. I'm the CEO of ShuttleOps, and today I want to take a moment to go through code, low code, no code, and the impact and implications it has on DevOps. So before we dive right into it, I just want to provide a bit of background. And this is really how we started to get to where we wanted to be to start thinking about the no code, low code, and coded journey. So over the last 5 or so years, we've had the luxury of working with all sorts of organizations, starting from startups all the way to Fortune 10. And a lot of these engagements involved us working with leaders such as Chef Software and HashiCorp. The industries we worked in varied, and over the last 2 years, we really focused a lot on Chef Habitat and how to scale out the ChefEffortless Pattern in the enterprise. More recently, we've done some novel Habitat deployments to edge devices such as point of sale systems. But throughout all of this, we were side by side with our customers in the trenches, and we really got to feel their pain when it comes to digital transformation and their DevOps journey. And that's really where all of this no code, low code, and coded journey begins for us. And so a lot of the challenges we see today really span across technology, people, process, and culture. So if we take a step back and look at what the ecosystem looks like today, it is very fragmented. There's a lot of point solutions, and you may be using a lot of these solutions today. And you've probably felt how challenging it is to really integrate all these solutions and build that end-to-end delivery pipeline. And you're not alone. We've all felt that. And on top of this, there's the skill gap that's present in order to be able to stitch all this together, get the right people on board, retain the people, share the knowledge, and then scale beyond either a few people or a few teams, depending on how your organization is structured. Once you get past that, there's the challenge with process and being able to align the business processes to the automation you want to implement. And finally, there's the silos. We all love our silos and we all like to stick to silos. And we've been trying to break down silos for a long time now with some success. But with that comes challenges with ownership technology, who owns which piece of the puzzle as we change what the technology landscape looks like, and then being able to collaborate across the teams in an effective manner. And this is where a lot of us have spent our time trying to solve problems in the DevOps space. And to really understand how we got here, we kind of need to take a step back to see where it all began with the emergence of DevOps. So if we look at where DevOps started, it would have been somewhere in the mid 2000s, maybe around 2000 to 2005. And at this point, there was no DevOps terminology. DevOps wasn't coined till about 2008. And it really started off early on with sysadmins. And sysadmins were building tools and scripts to be able to automate the management of infrastructure, which then became known as configuration management. And over time, that ecosystem matured. And as that ecosystem matured, that's when a shift in mentality started. And we really started thinking about, well, how does technology impact the processes we want to change? What are the people and skills we need? And what are the cultural shifts we have to make to really be efficient to gain value? And that's all the challenges we deal with today. But as all of this matured, we saw a lot of new entrants into the DevOps marketplace. And with that, we saw the everything as code movement grow. And that's really where we are today, where adoption at scale is slowly starting to level out. We have a lot of players, and we're getting very comfortable with the idea of as everything is code. However, at the same time, there was another movement that was starting, and it was this no code movement. And I'm going to dig into this a bit more. So what do we mean by no code? And the first time I really started thinking about no code, I thought of something like this, and you may already be familiar with this. And this is the Amazon AWS EC2 console, right? You'd use this to spin up servers. I can go in here and without any code, I can click through, I can spin up as many servers as I want and keep going. And so this is great, right? This delivers servers. But the challenge here is if we look at, what are we trying to do with DevOps? We're trying to really deliver applications from end to end. And this doesn't get us there. This gets us, to a point where we have a server, but then we have to do a lot more to it to be able to get to a point where it's actually delivering value for the business. So what about end-to-end application delivery, and how does no code really address this? Well, to understand how we get there, we really need to look at, the shaded area here between code and no code. And this is where patterns come in. And this is really coming from the coded environment, right? So as code matured, one of the things we've probably all been privy to is to see all these different patterns emerge in the marketplace. So best patterns for configuration management, best patterns for compliance, best patterns for secrets management. And without these patterns, you wouldn't really have the ability to scale out no code and really look at things in a different way. But with the emergence of these patterns, no code started to gain more momentum and started coming into the picture. And so if we look at where we are today in 2020, we are getting to this point of intersection between code and no code. And if you were to Google, 2020 DevOps trends, you'd see articles come up from publications like DZone, Tech Republic, DevOps.com that all hint at the movement from code to no code or a combination thereof with various tooling in the industry. So what does this mean for the Chef ecosystem? And so with Chef's been talking about the coded enterprise for a while now. And so it's a very developer, very technical movement of delivering value through code. But last year, Chef did something, and they announced what was the ChefEffortless Pattern at ChefConf 2019. And before this was coined the effortless pattern, it was actually being used by Chef and Chef customers, and we were there on the ground floor with Chef at some of their customers, figuring out what the effortless pattern looked like. And this was all done through code. And what the effortless pattern gives us is it simplifies the equation of delivering configuration management and compliance in a standard way through Habitat by getting rid of the Chef server, replacing environment cookbooks patterns with Chef Habitat channels to enable promotions. So everything can be done in a standardized way. But the most important thing is it's a pattern. And so with a pattern, that gives us the ability to look at it through a different lens, and more specifically, a no-code lens. But let's dive a bit deeper into this. So you may be familiar with this diagram right here. This was lifted right off the Chef website. And so I'd like to thank the Chef marketing team for this and apologize for what I'm about to do to it. And so here we have the different teams being able to interact with Chef Habitat, InSpec, and Chef Infra to be able to deliver different packages to their different environments. And so if we look at what this looks like in real life, it's a bit more complicated. Right. So it's not as easy as, having teams be able to deliver that seamlessly. The teams have to work with source control, such as GitHub, to be able to commit their Habitat plans, inspect profiles, and infra cookbooks. Then they may need to store secrets in something like HashiCorp Vault to be able to deliver secrets securely to their environments. On top of that, they would have to create and manage pipelines in something like Jenkins or another CI tool to be able to build and deliver the packages to Chef Habitat Builder, and then eventually run a provisioning agent such as Terraform to be able to provision the infrastructure that the packages are going to be delivered to. Once the packages are delivered to that infrastructure, or I should say the Habitat supervisor is, the supervisor would be able to pull down the packages from Builder, as well as fetch any secrets at runtime. And so this is a very common approach we've seen and executed with various customers in the past. And so if we take this and we take a look at it through, what could this mean in a no-code lens? It looks something like this, right? So we still have the teams working with Chef Habitat, InSpec, and Infra to be able to build out the application plans, the compliance profiles, and the configuration management cookbooks. And that all still goes into GitHub. But what no code tries to do when it looks at pipelines is it tries to democratize it. Instead of being a very technical process, the idea here is it would be a drag and drop process to create the pipelines. And we can do that because we know what we're dealing with, right? It's a specific pattern. We're dealing with habitat. We're dealing with habitat packages. We know what builds can look like. We know what provisioning and application delivery can look like. We know how we need to apply configuration to those habitat secrets. And that's where the patterns come in. So it simplifies the equation. And the goal here is not to replace code, but it's to accelerate that digital transformation. But the one downside of no code is, again, it's very opinionated and it's very pattern driven. So what if you have pieces of the equation that don't necessarily align well to that pattern? And so that's where low code comes into play. So what low code really is it's building on top of no code to be able to extend it to allow customizations that can address any specific requirements your organization has that's not reflected in a specific pattern. So with the code that comes from the habitat plans now and the inspect profiles and the infra cookbooks, coupled with the no code to be able to democratize managing pipelines and provisioning, and then extending upon that to do low code, you see how a end-to-end code, no code, low code solution really works for the Chef habitat and Chef infra and inspect environments. And that's really where we came up with ShuttleOps from. So we took that and we baked it into a no-code platform to be able to derive the value that the ChefEffortless pattern brings us and be able to accelerate some of that digital transformation. And so with that, I want to take you through a demo of what that actually looks like in real life. And so for this demo, we're going to be using a couple different things. We're going to be using Chef Infra OS Hardening Cookbook. So this is Chef Infra packaged with Chef Habitat in the Effortless pattern. We're going to be doing the same with the Chef Inspect profile. And then we're going to be using Grafana and Prometheus as the applications that we're going to be deploying to the server coming from the public Habitat builder. And we're going to do this with ShuttleOps, and it's actually going to be reporting data into Chef Automate 2. The ShuttleOps repositories here are open source, so they're available for you to look at and use as you wish. So with that, let me just launch ShuttleOps and jump into it. So the first thing you're presented to with ShuttleOps here is the logins. You have the standard GitHub, GitLab, and Bitbucket, but you also have the local login. And with the local login, business users within the organization or users that don't have access to source control are able to log in to be part of that DevOps process. And this is a big part of democratizing DevOps. So I'm just going to click the GitHub icon here. And the first thing you would see here is the connect page. And so the connect page, once you log in, allows you to connect to the different tooling in your ecosystem. And for today, we're connected to AWS, GitHub, and Builder. And one of the key things I want to show here in Builder is the ability to connect to multiple builders. So right now we're using the public builder, but you can also connect to multiple on-prem or local builders that you have. So you can build and deploy from multiple locations. The other piece here, once you're connected, is build. And we have a build going right now. And I will actually go into this build pipeline right now and show you how this works. So on the left-hand side here, we have a few different sections, and these can all be dragged and dropped into the pipeline editor. And this is really how we allow no code to be able to accelerate some of the building of pipelines, but also democratize the process of building and delivering applications. So if we wanted to have code be built on commits, on completions of other pipelines or schedules, you can just drag and drop these icons over here, and that will adjust the pipeline to be able to do those actions. We have a code block. This is where you define the Chef Habitat repos you want to build. And then you have notifications you can set via email or Slack to users within your organization if a build is successful or if it failed. And then you have gates here. And this is where we really start to align with business process. And so you can drag and drop these gates into your pipeline to be able to provide audited approvals, time delays, or acknowledgements, so that you can easily align to existing processes without having to do any additional work. And so I'm just going to expand the code block here. And you can see this is already pulling in a package or a repository from GitHub. And if I want to add another package to the build pipeline, I can select it from GitHub, and it tells me what Habitat builder I'd be building to. And the one advantage of code and being very opinionated is that we can do this in a very simple way for the user, because we, one, know that it's Chef Habitat we're building for, and we know exactly where we need to build. And so that's really all the user has to do to be able to take advantage of no code in the context of Chef Habitat. Right. And I'm just going to hit launch, and that actually starts the build process. And so this pipeline here just finished building. So let's take a look at what happens when you kick off builds, right? It tells you all the information about the build job, who kicked it off, when it was kicked off. And it also provides a history of the steps in that pipeline that were executed and what time they were executed at. The other nice thing here is that it gives you a full readout of the build log. So if there was ever an issue, the developers would be able to troubleshoot any problems right from within the interface here without going into any other system. And so that's how no code opinionated builds for Chef Habitat could work. The other piece here is deploy. So now you have something built, ready to deploy. You need to deploy it somewhere, right? So I'm just going to open up this effortless monitoring pipeline and click Edit. And so very similar to the build, we have various tasks on the left-hand side, but we have a couple distinct pieces here. We have application components, and we have your different cloud providers. So I have the application components already enabled out here, as well as the AWS cloud provider. So I'm going to dig a bit into that. And so when I open this up, I have this pre-configured now with Grafana and Prometheus, which are fairly common tools in the DevOps space for metrics aggregation and monitoring. And then I also have the ChefEffortless OS hardening and ChefEffortless Linux baseline packages. And so if I want to add any other packages, I could really do that from a builder I've selected. So this is the public builder. So you can pull in packages from here to deploy, or you could pull in packages that were built using your build pipelines. Okay. And since I have everything configured here, I'm just going to dive in a bit deeper. And again, because Habitat is a first-class citizen, we can abstract away things like management of configuration. So we have configurations here for Grafana, and I'm able to update any of these configuration values and save it, and then it's going to be automatically saved and managed on a per pipeline and environment basis. And so what that means is all the overhead of figuring out how am I going to manage configurations across environments, how am I going to apply these at runtime, what are the pipelines I need to do this at scale, all that fades away, and all the information here is stored in a secure vault. The other piece that this brings to the table is the ability to do Habitat service binds. So for those familiar with service binds, this is how Habitat does service discovery and connects to other services a specific service needs in order to operate. And so Grafana needs a backend of Prometheus. And through this dropdown, I can select any package I've pulled in to bind to. And in this case, I want to bind to Prometheus, and that's set up and it's ready to go. And that's really it. One thing I do want to highlight is on the effortless packages here, we do have Chef Automate configured because they're going to be reporting into Automate after they're deployed. And so we have the URLs, the token, and reporting it into Automate enabled. And now if I go to the AWS tab, because I'll be deploying to the cloud, we have Core Grafana and Prometheus and the two effortless packages already configured here. And if I wanted to adjust my server, I could do so by hitting the edit button. And now I can select the different types of servers, how many instances I want to deploy to, SSH keys, storage sizes. And if I wanted to do other configurations such as firewall rules, DNS, load balancers, if you have multiple instances, you can do so. The last piece here is startup scripts. And so this is where we get into some of the low code. And so remember when I said before, low code's typically built off of no code. And so we had this no code interface, but we know that this can't do everything. And there may be other things you want to do on a specific server after it starts up. And this is where you could provide that code in order to achieve those goals. And that's really it. And so I've already pre-launched this for the sake of time. And so we can quickly take a look at what that actually looks like. So if we go to manage now, we have this effortless monitoring application stack deployed in AWS. It's reading in the health from the Habitat supervisor. So we know all the services there are healthy. Just to show it's a real living, breathing server, I'll click on this URL. It takes me to Grafana and I'll quickly log in here. And so we've logged into Grafana and we've actually connected to a data source already. And that's really due to the service discovery capabilities provided by Habitat. And I spun this up ahead of time yesterday. And so it's been running since then. The other piece I want to show here is Chef Automate. So one of the things I said was we're deploying OS hardening and we're deploying compliance. And so if I go over to my Chef Automate tab here, there's one node reporting in and it checked in last 2 minutes ago. It's an Ubuntu server. And if I click on the compliance tab here, we can see that we have that same node here and it has its compliance controls enabled and it's passing. So we can see it's running the effortless Linux baseline compliance scans. And these are all the scans that are passing. And if I switch over back to ShuttleOps, we can actually dive a bit deeper here by looking at the application log. So if I pull up the logs, we can see the Habitat supervisor logs being streamed in. We can also see the effortless package OS hardening runtime for Chef Infra. And we can see the logs for the compliance profile hardening through Chef Inspect. And so all of this is provided in a no-code way. And so what does all of this really mean, right? So I just gave an overview of code, low code, no code, and then showed you what it can all look like for the Chef stack within the cloud with a no-code solution. And no code doesn't solve all of our challenges, right? So if we go back to where we started with technology, people, and process and culture challenges we were experiencing today. And you go full circle and none of these completely go away. And so no code, low code is not a silver bullet. And so on the technology side, code is still required. We still require code to package up applications. We're still requiring code for compliance and config management. And there's still some low code elements as well. And the ecosystem, even with a low code solution is still somewhat fragmented, right? It's not going to change overnight, but over time, it will definitely change. On the people side, the skill gap is smaller, but there's a skill gap that still remains. So again, like the application automation, compliance, and config management, that still requires skilled individuals to be able to do that. But we've taken away some of the other elements, such as building out CI/CD, dealing with secrets management, dealing with provisioning. And so that gap has now been reduced. But on the process front, even though you can now tie business processes into low-code solutions, there's still going to be challenges, right? If there's a bad process and there's still bottlenecks in your process that are outside of technology, the best automation, the best technology aren't going to solve those processes. So those are still things that need to be looked at and optimized. And silos. Silos can have thinner walls with collaboration through code, but as well as a no-code platform, because everybody's going to be talking the same language. However, I am a big believer that people will continue to congregate in silos, and it's really about the increased collaboration and communication, and not necessarily breaking down silos, but maybe having glass silos that you can see through. And so these are challenges that we will continue to tackle as we go forward in the DevOps space. But what the main takeaway here should be is code, low code, and no code will accelerate digital transformation. So it's not a question of, do I need just low code? Do I need just no code? Or do I need code? The answer is, in reality, you probably need a bit of all of it. And it's really about finding the right mix for your organization. And so if we look at where we're going, some of the new no-code trends are fairly new, and it's still an emerging marketplace. And same with some of the pieces in low-code. And we've just seen Chef Infra 16 announce some low-code capabilities with the ability to implement cookbooks now via YAML instead of Ruby. And so we'll continue to see changes to both low-code and no-code more significantly in the coming years. And over time, based on what we're seeing in the trends, no code will increase its impact in the industry. But again, it's not going to be the only game in town, right? You're still going to need low code. You're still going to need code. And it's really about picking the right mix to make sure that you and your organization can be as successful as possible and accelerate digital transformation. And so that's really all I have today. So thank you for joining and listening to Code, No Code, Low Code, the DevOps implications.